Welcome to JT Scary Tales. He is a CEO killer. 3 true horror stories animated. Story 1. Carter Office Siege. The morning started like any other at Medor Insurance. Employees tapped away at their keyboards, answering calls, processing claims. Just another routine day in the corporate machine. The New York City skyline shimmered through the office windows. But inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed with an artificial coldness. Luigi Magnan sat at his desk, a recent Ivy League graduate fresh into the corporate world. He was good at his job, fast and efficient, but he had already seen the cracks in the system. Denied claims, desperate customers, policies designed to make people feel secure while the company found loopholes to avoid payouts. He told himself it wasn't his problem. Then Carter walked in. At first, no one noticed him. A tall man in his 40s. Scruffy beard. A baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. He moved past reception with purpose, gripping something beneath his coat. It wasn't until he reached the center of the open plan office and pulled out the shotgun that the screaming started. "Everyone down," Carter's voice thundered, sending chairs skidding and papers flying as employees ducked beneath their desks. Luigi froze. His heart pounded in his ears as he watched Carter turn toward the reception desk, aiming his shotgun at the trembling receptionist. "I want to talk to the man in charge. Now." The phone slipped from her hands as she struggled to find words. The office manager, a middle-aged man named Greg, stepped forward, hands raised. "Sir, please, I said now." Carter fired a shot into the ceiling. Plaster rained down. The office fell into terrified silence. Luigi's mind raced. This wasn't just a random attack. Carter had a reason for being here. He recognized the desperation in the man's eyes, the kind he had heard in the voices of customers denied life-saving coverage. A woman sobbed behind a cubicle. Another stifled a whimper. Carter's breathing was ragged, his grip tight on the weapon. He wasn't here to negotiate. "Where's the CEO?" Carter demanded. Greg hesitated. "Mr. Thompson? He isn't here today." Carter's eyes burned with rage. "Liar." He grabbed Greg by the collar and shoved the shotgun against his ribs. "My wife is dying because of you bastards. You denied her treatment. Let her rot while you cash your fat paychecks." Luigi felt his stomach churn. He had seen the denial notices before. A flicker of guilt ran through him. The SWAT team would come. There was no doubt about that. The office was on the 15th floor. But police would storm in soon enough. Carter wouldn't make it out alive. Luigi saw it in his eyes. This wasn't about making demands. This was a man who had already lost everything. A slow, eerie calm settled over Carter as he looked at the terrified employees huddled beneath their desks. "You all go home at night and sleep just fine, don't you?" he muttered. "While my wife is hooked up to machines, waiting for a miracle you stole from her." A loudspeaker crackled outside. "This is the NYPD. Drop your weapon and come out with your hands up." Carter flinched but didn't lower the shotgun. His knuckles whitened as he looked around, chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. Luigi knew this was it. "Sir," he said, standing up slowly, "your wife wouldn't want this." Carter's eyes snapped toward him. "Shut up. She wouldn't want you to die like this." Luigi swallowed hard. "Let these people go. Let me go. I'll tell your wife's story. I'll make sure people know what happened." Carter's grip wavered. The room held its breath. Then the glass shattered. A deafening crack. A red mist. Carter's body jerked backward as the sniper's bullet tore through his skull. He hit the floor before his shotgun did. The room remained frozen, the scent of gunpowder and blood thick in the air. It took a full minute before anyone screamed. The SWAT team stormed in, barking orders, checking for injuries. Luigi didn't move. His eyes were locked on Carter's lifeless body. The desperation that had fueled him now reduced to a stain on the office floor. Later, as he sat in a police car wrapped in a shock blanket, he overheard the officers talking. Carter's wife had passed away in the hospital just minutes before he walked into the office. He never even knew. Luigi stared out the window at the flashing lights of the city, the corporate towers stretching into the night. He thought about the system, the loopholes, the people who suffered while companies flourished. And for the first time since taking the job, he felt something close to shame. Story 2. Idaho Murders. I never liked parties. Being an introvert, I preferred the quiet of my own space. That night was no different. The house was unusually still, a stark contrast to the usual weekend chaos. Maddie and Kaylee had come home earlier, their laughter echoing through the hall. Not long after, Xana and Ethan followed, the sound of the TV blending with their muffled voices upstairs. I was downstairs in my small room, scrolling through my phone, trying to ignore the world above me. By 2 a.m., the house was silent, nothing out of the ordinary. I figured everyone had gone to bed. Then I heard it, a noise that didn't belong. A muffled thud, then another. My fingers froze over my phone screen, my heartbeat quickening. It wasn't the sound of someone stumbling or dropping something. It was heavier, deliberate. My mouth went dry as I strained to listen. Maybe it was nothing, I told myself. Still, a deep unease curled in my gut. I got up, telling myself I was just getting a glass of water. Nothing more. But as I opened my door, the air felt thick, charged with something I couldn't name. I crept toward the kitchen, my bare feet making no sound on the hardwood floor. That's when I saw him. At first, I thought it was Ethan. The build was similar, broad shoulders, an average height, but then I noticed the mask. Black, smooth, featureless. My breath hitched. He moved slowly, purposefully, a long knife glinting in his hand. The faint moonlight from the window caught the blade, making it shimmer like a predator's tooth. I ducked behind the kitchen counter, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would give me away. I peeked over the edge just as he slipped into Maddie's room. The door clicked shut behind him. The silence stretched on, unbearable. Then came the faintest sound. A muffled gasp. Then nothing. My stomach churned as he reappeared, the knife now dripping. He didn't hesitate, moving toward Kaylee's room next. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body refused to move. All I could do was watch. He emerged again, his movements calm, methodical, as if he had done this 1,000 times. The knife was slick with blood now, droplets trailing behind him like breadcrumbs. My chest felt like it would cave in as he turned toward Xana and Ethan's room. I crawled toward the stairs, desperate to find a hiding place. My hands shook as I pressed myself against the wall behind a tall vase. My breath shallow, my whole body trembling. Through the crack in the door, I saw him push into their room. Then Xana's voice broke the silence. "What are you doing?" she asked, her voice groggy and confused. Ethan stirred beside her, his sleepy mumble barely audible. The man didn't answer. He lunged. The knife plunged into Ethan's chest with a sickening crunch. Xana screamed, but it didn't last long. The sound of her terror turned into choked gasps as blood sprayed the walls. My entire body seized in fear. I clamped my hand over my mouth, tears streaming down my face as I tried to stay silent. Then, he paused. For a moment, time stopped. His head turned slightly, scanning the hallway. My heart pounded so hard I was sure he could hear it. He took a step toward the vase. I held my breath, my chest burning, my vision blurring. But then, as if deciding I wasn't worth his time, he turned and walked away. I stayed frozen for what felt like hours. The first rays of sunlight streamed through the windows before I dared to move. My body ached, my throat was raw, my mind shattered. When I finally stumbled into the living room, it felt like stepping into a nightmare. The house was crawling with cops. The air was thick with the stench of blood and bleach. Crime scene tape crisscrossed the halls. An officer noticed me and asked who I was. I stammered something barely coherent. They guided me outside, treating me like some lost child. I sat on the curb, staring blankly as the chaos unfolded around me. I overheard snippets of conversations. No fingerprints, no signs of forced entry. 4 lives gone. No one knew why. Weeks passed, and the whole campus felt suffocated under the weight of fear. The media swarmed like vultures, spinning theories and pointing fingers. Then, in December, they arrested Bryan Kohberger, a criminology PhD student. The irony made me want to vomit. His car had been spotted near the house that night. His DNA matched the knife sheath left behind. But none of that erased the terror that haunted me. Even now, I can't close my eyes without seeing those cold, empty eyes staring at me. The Idaho killings remain one of the most chilling crimes in recent memory. On November 13, 2022. 4 University of Idaho students, Kaylee Goncalves, Madison Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin, were brutally murdered in their off-campus home in Moscow, Idaho. The shocking crime left the small college town on edge. After weeks of investigation, police arrested Brian Koberger in December 2022. DNA evidence, surveillance footage, and cell phone data tied him to the crime. As of 2025, the case is still unfolding, drawing national attention for its disturbing nature and ongoing legal proceedings. Story 3. Rodney Alcala attack. Los Angeles, 1968. The air was thick with the scent of gasoline and the distant hum of rock music. The Sunset Strip pulsed with life, neon lights flickering, laughter spilling from the clubs, and the city's restless energy vibrating through the streets. That night was supposed to be my last in town. My family was moving to New York the next morning, and my friends insisted we make the most of it. That's when I saw him. He stood near the entrance of a club, leaning casually against the wall, his dark eyes scanning the crowd. He wasn't bad-looking, tall, with thick wavy hair and a confident smirk. He looked like any other guy on the strip, just another face in the sea of dreamers and drifters. But there was something about the way he watched people, like he was studying them, calculating. "Hey," he said later that night, flashing a smile, "you guys should come back to my place. Keep the party going." I hesitated, but my friends laughed it off. "It's just Rodney," one of them said. "He's harmless." I should have listened to my gut. We piled into his car, and as we drove, the strip's bright lights gave way to darker, quieter streets. The further we got, the more uneasy I felt. Finally, we pulled up to a rundown house, its front porch sagging, the windows dark. Inside, the air smelled stale, faintly of mildew. Rodney handed around a joint, and my friends accepted without hesitation. I, on the other hand, couldn't shake my unease. He kept looking at me, his smile fading into something else, something colder, hungrier. "Come with me," Rodney said suddenly, grabbing my arm. "What?" I pulled back instinctively. "Come on," he said, his grip tightening. His voice was sharp now, his tone unrelenting. Before I could protest, he yanked me down the hall, shoving open a door and pulling me inside a dimly lit bedroom. The door slammed shut behind us. "Let me go," I screamed, twisting in his grasp. "Shut up," he snapped, his breath hot against my skin. His eyes had changed. No more charm, no more smirk, just cold calculation. He took off his belt, wrapping it around his fist. "You think you can just leave?" My heart pounded. "Please." Before I could finish, his fist connected with my face. Pain exploded between my eyes as my head snapped back. I crumpled to the floor, dazed but still conscious. Rodney knelt over me, his breath ragged. "You're not going anywhere," he whispered, almost amused. Then he pulled out a knife. The blade glinted in the dim light. He ran it along the fabric of my blouse, slicing it open with terrifying ease. My breath caught. Was this how I was going to die? I wanted to scream, to fight, but my body refused to move. "You shouldn't have gotten in the car," he muttered, more to himself than to me. "This is your fault." Tears streamed down my face as he gagged me with his belt, tying my wrists with a necktie. I thrashed, but he was strong, too strong. Panic flooded my veins. Then, a pounding on the door. "Rodney," a voice from outside. "Open the door." Rodney froze, his head snapping toward the noise. His grip on the knife tightened, and for a horrifying moment, I thought he was going to finish it anyway. "Rodney, open up." The voice was more urgent now. "Mike, break the window." The sound of shattering glass filled the room. A figure burst through, his eyes wide with horror as he took in the scene. Me on the floor, Rodney towering over me, the knife gleaming in his hand. Rodney stepped back, his expression eerily calm. "Take her," he said simply, as if I were nothing more than an object to be handed off. Mike didn't hesitate. He grabbed me, pulling me through the broken window. My legs were weak, my body trembling, but I clung to him as we stumbled into the night. Outside, the air was crisp and sharp, like I could finally breathe again. A car screeched to a halt nearby, a couple inside waving us over. They didn't ask questions, they just got us the hell out of there. Rodney didn't follow. At Mike's apartment, His neighbor, a nurse, patched me up. I sat there in shock, my mind replaying the night like a broken record. How close I'd come, how lucky I was to be alive. For years, I carried the guilt with me. I should have seen the signs. I should have known better. Then, years later, I saw his face again. A friend sent me a newspaper clipping, Rodney Alcala, arrested for the attempted murder of a young girl named Talai Shapiro. As I read about his crimes, my stomach twisted. I wasn't the only one. There were others, so many others. Women who never got the chance to escape. Women who never got to tell their stories. Rodney Alcala, known as the dating game killer, was a predator hiding in plain sight. He used his charm and photography skills to lure young women, manipulating them with promises of fame. His victims spanned decades, his crimes growing more brutal each time. Eventually, DNA evidence linked him to multiple murders, and he was sentenced to death. But that didn't bring back the lives he stole. It didn't erase the nightmares. To this day, I wonder what would have happened if Mike hadn't broken that window. If my friends hadn't pounded on that door, I wonder if my name would have been just another in a long list of victims. I survived, but I was never the same again. Do you love spine-chilling stories and eerie mysteries? You've come to the right place. At JT Scary Tales, we bring you the most terrifying and thrilling scary tales from around the world. From haunted places to unexplained phenomena, our scary tales will keep you on the edge of your seat. Subscribe now and dive into the dark world of scary tales.